Every generation needs to be free to be able to have their own ideas of what's important to them, their own goals, their own vision, their own values, for them to become productive and useful in the world. Because if you think about money, money is, we tend to say, oh, I need, so people tend to say they need money, they need money. Well, actually, no, it's quite the opposite. Money needs you. Money is merely a tool. It has no meaning other than the meaning you and I give it or our children give it. And so if we understand that money is looking for you, not the other way around, then what ideas would you have for it?
Welcome to Gratitude Geek, the relationship marketing podcast helping DIY marketers find your micro influencer magic so you attract raving fans and repeat buyers. I'm your host, Candice Rodarty, and this week I'm joined by personal finance expert Kim Curtis. Kim is the best-selling author of Money Secrets, Keys to Smart Investing and Retirement Secrets. She is a nationally recognized wealth management advisor, as well as the president and CEO of Wealth Legacy Institute. Her groundbreaking work in developing a highly personalized client-centric planning model was recognized in the Journal of Practical Estate Planning, winning the Editor's Choice Award. She's been profiled in several publications, including the Wall Street Journal, y'all. Kim has attained numerous professional designations and has been recognized by the financial planning industry for achieving the highest level of competence and expertise. She's one smart cookie. Welcome, Kim.
Thanks, Candice. I'm so happy to be here.
All right, so tell us your story. How did you become such a smart cookie?
Through a quiz, believe it or not. I'm not joking. Honestly, Candice, it was a quiz. Many of us have friends in human resources. And when you're in a life transition, they put you through a battery of tests. And what came up was finance. And so I actually, believe it or not, have a legal background. And my legal background is in negotiation, mediation, and arbitration. And I was with a national dispute resolution firm out of New York City. They sent me to Salt Lake City to open up an office. And as a result, I became more of a spokesperson instead of doing settlement conferences and negotiations and mediations. And so as I became a spokesperson, my interest was not it wasn't as much fun because I wanted to be in the middle of the sand pile. Instead, I was, a talking head, like now, what happened? And at 30, I was like, okay, I'm entrepreneurial. How do I become entrepreneurial? What are the skills that I want to keep? And how do I keep that going? And that's when personal finance came up. With a negotiation mediation background, what do couples mostly argue over? Besides the number one thing that we all can guess, the second is money. And so that I've been doing that for the last 30 years.
I thought the first thing people argued over was money. Okay, so you talked about intrapreneurship and entrepreneurship. Just quickly define both. In your
Sure. Entrepreneurial is where you act like an entrepreneur, but it's inside a corporate entity. So you are learning the skills of entrepreneurship. However, you have the safety net of a corporate structure. And then entrepreneurial in finance, I ended up with a brokerage firm. And with my legal background, this is actually, Candice, a really interesting story. One day, I decided to read the disclosures on the back of an investment statement. And at the time, it was 8 pages. It was four, 2 to a page, so tiny, tiny, tiny print.
Holy moly.
When I read it, there were so many conflicts of interest and fees that all of a sudden a tear came down my cheek. And it hit me like, whoa. I mean, I think every practitioner professional wants to put their client's interests first. Sometimes the structure of the entity makes it harder. And after reading that, I recognized that I was out of alignment. It's kind of like when you go to a grocery store and what's at eye level on the shelves, they pay more for that shelf space. It's similar in the Wall Street world, that there's a shelf space that product providers pay to have access to the advisors. And so that's when I created a firm that put clients first, not last. And that's when I created Wealth Legacy Institute. And that was 16 years ago. So it's like this boutique badass firm that actually is completely in alignment with everything that's important to me.
And how long is your disclosure sheet?
Half a page. And it's only because the SEC makes me say how old I am and other things that I can't, hide.
The
like
SEC
age.
makes you tell your age?
Yeah, and in the filing documents, it has my education, my date of birth, it has everything. So it doesn't have my weight. Thank God.
Oh my goodness gracious. Wow. So was it really hard to break out from a corporate umbrella and do your own thing? I mean, what was it? I mean, because this is a lot of folks listening right now might be in a position where they're working for somebody else and they know they can do it better. So offer advice.
Mm-hmm. So I can't wait to offer advice on that, because remember at 30, I felt like I had the keys to the restroom. I mean, I felt like I was like Wonder Woman, master of the universe. And so when I made the switch, I thought it would be really easy. I thought, oh my goodness, in 3 to 5 years, knock it out of the park. Well, 5 years came. It's like, okay, 5 to 7 years. 7 years came. And honestly, I was still not there in a way that I felt comfortable. So for the viewers and listeners out there, I honestly say it's that 7 to 10 year sweet spot that you are confident, you're comfortable, you're paying yourself finally versus your team, if you're lucky and fortunate enough to have a team. And it was a solid 7 to 10 years before I felt like I know what I'm doing in a way that I am extremely confident and know that it's completely in alignment. It was a solid, long journey.
Yeah. Anybody who thinks you can do it overnight has been watching too many movies. Let's talk
that
about
was my problem.
So I remember my husband and I started our business in 98, and there were many times where we paid the employees first and didn't pay ourselves at all because they were more important. And then I kept reading about, these talking head people would talk about, oh, you always have to pay yourself first. You always have to pay yourself first. And that felt so disingenuous to me. And I know they were talking about savings. But the language there was, it's just, no, I need to take care of my staff, because if I don't take care of my staff, we're not going to be able to take care of ourselves at all, ever. Right. So I talk about that.
Well, I think it depends on the nature of your business. I think in the story that you've described, the ability to have infrastructure in place to deliver a product or a service that is in alignment, that's what's important to you, is that you absolutely are last, because you need to get that infrastructure in place and make sure that you're delivering the service or the product in a way that matters. And so I think that if you're a solopreneur, sure, you got to pay yourself first. Otherwise, there's never anything left over. So that's really a different perspective, because as a solopreneur, you better give yourself a W-2. And then if you're an S corporation, to have that flow through, whatever is on top of that for the tax benefit of that is attractive. But if you don't give yourself a W-2 wage, you will continue to put money back into the business. And that is a hard thing to get out of, that swirl.
So talk about the benefits of being an S Corp and who that's good for.
Everyone almost. I mean, to have a business entity versus a partnership that you fell into because you didn't do anything is important. Having some kind of business entity, whether it's an S Corp or an LLC or even a C, depending on what's going on, gives you tax benefits that are significant. And then the biggest one is dividends. Anything left over from a W-2 is taxed at a dividend level, and that tax benefit is more attractive than wage income.
Well,
and then
so
the deductions.
But differentiate between S Corp and LLC, because a lot of solopreneurs are thinking that they have to go the LLC route, and that I don't think that's true. So,
yes,
but I'm
this
not.
is not
I'm not
my area of expertise, so I'm gonna defer a little bit. I think that the reason an S Corp may be attractive depends on what you're doing on the back end in terms of selling and the stock that you can do in terms of if you're going to have other shareholders with an S corp versus members in an LLC. So I think it depends on the structure that you want to create in terms of succession that perhaps may make an S corporation more attractive than an LLC.
Okay. So that's
but talk to a lawyer.
That's a conversation for a lawyer.
Yes.
Not a financial advisor or financial expert. Okay. So you were going to talk about deductions there for a second, and I interrupted you.
No, just different advantages as an entity. You protect yourself versus hanging a shingle and not creating an entity around you.
Yeah.
A corporate entity.
Yeah. I once knew a woman. Her husband was a contractor. He did, residential build outs, commercial build outs, and they were self-employed. They didn't even have an LLC. Mm-hmm. And I was like, why? What happens if something goes wrong? And she goes, I trust God.
Nothing's wrong with that, but it's good to have a backup plan.
I don't know.
I think people fall into it not necessarily knowing any better. And you could actually create a corporate entity quite easily today through LegalZoom or some of these other online platforms that allow you to create the entity and then make sure and give you the guidelines of how to manage that entity each year. And it's not as difficult as one would think.
Well, the tax advantages, in my opinion, are far outweigh the cost of setting it up and paying the accountant, right?
Yes. Yes.
It's the tax advantages. Okay. So tell me about your book. Who's your book for?
2 books. And Money Secrets was a bestseller and it won 4 book awards. And Money Secrets, Keys to Smart Investing, pulls back the curtain on the billion-dollar financial services industry to reveal why smart people make bad investment mistakes. I love that book. And then Retirement Secrets is you've worked your butt off, saving, and you're finally at that place of stepping off. What's next? So it talks a little bit about finances, but it's mostly a lifestyle book. It's mostly how do you navigate the next 30 years of your life? And that happened. I had 3 different clients ask me, Kim, do you have any book suggestions when you retire? Like, what do you do? And no one had to really ask me in all the years in my work. 3 people within a couple months asked me the same question. And so being a researcher, data girl that I am, I had to go and buy all these different books and read them. And they were terrible. They were absolutely terrible. There's one book that I felt like had possibility, but it was written not well. And so I basically took the combination of all of these interesting sources and created this wonderful book that has activities at the back so that couples could have conversations with each other as it relates to what their joint and separate goals are. We have a whole section on retirement mapping in terms of there's over 500 or 600 different activities that you could cross out and highlight the ones you like. You may have had a hobby when you were a kid that you forgot about, on kind of what does that look like? How are you going to spend your time? And what are the things to keep longevity in play?
That sounds like so much fun.
It is a fun book. It is. But it's also, if you think about couples, you think, oh my God, I'm not going to do anything for the next, I'm going to step off. I'm going to give myself a break. They tend to think it's going to take longer before they get bored, but they get bored a lot sooner than they recognize. And if there's not some kind of joint plan, if you happen to be lucky enough to be married, then it's easy to fail quickly. It's easy to have a failed retirement. It has nothing to do with money.
Yeah. Yeah.
It primarily has a lot to do with health.
Oh.
Your new job is exercising. That's the new job.
Staying healthy.
Mm-hmm.
And people.
Movement.
Gratitude Geek is sponsored by HoneyBook. HoneyBook is the leading client platform for independent businesses. It lets us manage our workflow and client experience, streamlining all the steps it takes to sell and deliver personalized services. By combining tools like billing, contracts, and client communication, HoneyBook helps independents like you and me get organized and provide top-tier service at every step. I couldn't run my podcast nor my coaching business without HoneyBook. You can get started with 35% off your first year when you visit momgeek.com/HoneyBook. Membership options are flexible, and this amazing promotion applies whether you pay monthly or annually. Go to momgeek.com/HoneyBook for 35% off your first year. That's momgeek.com honeybook. So this is April of 2023, and France just passed a law increasing the retirement age by 2 years. And it's now 64 in France. And I think the retirement age in the United States is, what is
62.
it? 60. Is it? Is it
to have
62?
access. It's 59 and a half to have access to your money. It's 62 to have access to Social Security.
But what's the life expectancy?
I love that question. I actually think that if Social Security extended the age before you can access full retirement age benefits, like they did for the late boomers and the next gen after that, Gen Z, millennials. No, Gen Z. Do you know which
boomers, Gen X?
Gen X. Excuse me. Thank you. And maybe then do millennials and Gen Z that they don't think they're going to get it anyway. And so if you just add a couple more years to it, I think the Social Security system has the ability to actually do really well with just some minor changes. But yet it's a fear conversation and it gets people to the polls. So for late boomers, the full retirement age has changed to 67. It used to be 65. So they went from 65 to 67, and the average age when Social Security first came into being, which is in the 1930s under Roosevelt, the average age of a US citizen was 65.
Oh.
They did not plan on paying much in that realm. And so here we are today. The first opportunity is 62. The full retirement age now is 67. And then if you wait till age 70, you get a higher amount. So after 70, it doesn't serve you to wait. So there's so many things that can happen that allows for that system to be more productive by just doing minor tweaks. So the average age in the US is around 86 to 88, depending.
Wow. I know a lot of octogenarians who are still in great shape. My dad's an octogenarian and he swims. He swims 3 times a week, butterfly, the butterfly stroke, which that's one of the hardest strokes to do.
It is.
So I know another octogenarian who was running triathlons up until just a few years ago. So yeah, thank you. All right,
movement is life. For your dad, that's like cardio. Like that's a lot of work in the cardio realm, which is really helpful. But yes, as we age, we need to move. And it's hard sometimes when we think of being, when we had 3 years of a pandemic, it was hard for a lot of people to kind of get up and move.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. All right, what else should we talk about?
Oh, let's talk about money, because I love to talk about money. And, it's interesting because when I think of, I don't know if you've ever heard the conversation, what comes first, love or money?
Oh, that's a good question.
I know. I actually was asked that recently, and I had to really think about it for a minute, because money is an invisible thread that navigates through our human existence. It touches every piece of everything.
Yeah.
But it's actually love.
Well,
it's actually love is the one thing that creates success. I mean, you think money creates success, but it doesn't create happiness. And it's how do you define success? So that's a whole nother conversation. But when you think, if you're in a loving relationship, then everything is bliss. Like you're happier, you feel good about yourself, you're inspired, you have a positive outlook, you tend to be more fearless. And those are the things that ultimately bring about happiness.
Well, and you can be in love with yourself and be all those things.
Well, that's actually, that's the big one. That's actually the number one thing on success around money. Actually starts here. It's an inside game, not an outside game. And it actually starts with self-respect, self-worth. Because if you don't respect yourself in a way that you need to do certain things, or you give to others before yourself, it will be really hard to have success around money, believe it or not.
Yeah, because you don't feel like you deserve it. If you have low self-worth, you don't feel like you deserve it.
Yeah, that's right.
A lot of times, like the third generation of money will lose all their family's fortunes, right?
Have you heard that proverb?
Tell me.
So it's called, in the US, it's called shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves in 3 generations. But it's a universal proverb in any culture. It could be clog to clog, rice paddy to rice paddy. And what that means is that someone had an idea and turned it into a profitable business. That's your first gen, and worked their butt off to make it happen. The next generation moves from the fields, so to speak. That's the collar to collar, to the city, and joins the opera board or whatever, becomes involved in philanthropy. And the third generation, the family is fractured and the money is gone. Let's unpack that a little bit.
Yeah.
So the first gen, so the overarching conversation around that.
Well, and is there a dollar amount that, because home ownership is generational wealth. So if you teach your children to be homeowners, you're passing on the concept of generational wealth. And if you don't teach your children to be homeowners, they don't pass that down. So is there a dollar amount that
kicks in that proverb?
Yeah.
Yes, there absolutely is. When there's enough money that everyone wants it when you're gone and they know about it. So it also could be a business entity that was created in the family. So some may be employed in that business, second gen or third gen may be employed in that business. So yes, there is a wealth criteria around that. But the whole overarching principle is that every generation needs to be its own first generation. Every generation needs to be free to be able to have their own ideas of what's important to them, their own goals, their own vision, their own values, for them to become productive and useful in the world. Because if you think about money is, we tend to say, oh, I need, so people tend to say they need money. Well, actually, no, it's quite the opposite. Money needs you. Money is merely a tool. It has no meaning other than the meaning you and I give it, or our children give it. And so if we understand that money is looking for you, not the other way around, and what ideas would you have for it? And I mean, I'm going to say this one more time because it's really important to understand that it's not that you need money. It's quite the opposite. Money needs you. Money is looking for you. Let me unpack that. I grew up in the Buffalo area of New York State, and Buffalo straddles the Canadian border and the state of New York. And at one time, Niagara Falls was a big electricity producer for the state of New York. Now, the vast Niagara Falls has no power that's right there, other than the power plants that line its banks that create it. So the falls by itself has no power other than the power plants that produce the electricity. Money is the same way. It has no power, and it needs our ideas and our imagination and our creativity to turn it into something of use to the world.
That makes so much sense. And I recently visited Niagara Falls. It's freaking gorgeous.
Gorgeous. Absolutely. And the power around that. But even the energy.
So, okay. So no matter where you are, even if you're building a dam, the river didn't create the power, although rivers are very powerful, falls are very powerful, but all they can do is erode the riverbed and the wherever they are. Yeah,
mm-hmm.
Exactly. In order to harvest that power, you have to do something to it. Wow. So in order to harvest the power of money, you have to do something to harvest the power of money. So money has power, but you have to manipulate the money to. Wow, my brain is like doing this.
Oh, exactly. Because again, remember, it has no meaning other than the meaning you give it. So you have to show up with money with respect. You have to respect yourself to respect money. You have to love yourself to love what money can do for you and your family and the greater good. So when you think about your ideas and creativity, and all you solopreneurs and entrepreneurs and business owners, you may get it a little bit because you've just generated something, which is your business. Hopefully it's your passion. Because if it's your passion, that's the holy grail that opens the door to have money flow. Because if you're doing what you love, you're already in the energy flow.
Susie Orman wrote this book a million years ago. And in the book, she talks about organizing the dollar bills in your wallet so that all the heads are facing in the same direction and they're all nice and neat and crisp, right? And that's respecting the money. Nobody carries cash anymore.
Right.
So
My son doesn't, my daughter doesn't. Yeah.
So
It's digital.
how do you respect your money in your wallet now?
I think it's by the values. First of all, it's how you treat yourself. It's an inside game first. It starts here. And I think for women, generally speaking, it's a little harder because we've been socialized in a culture that women didn't create money. Money was created by men back in the day, and women didn't have access to money. It wasn't until my great-grand,
at least not in our culture.
Yeah.
Our cultures that are female focused.
True.
Okay, yeah.
True. That's fair for that clarity. Yes. But even then, I mean, we didn't even have the ability to vote.
Yeah.
Let alone have, when my grandmother, my great-grandmother had money, it was not for opportunities. It was for safety.
Yeah.
It wasn't for a great stock pick or a business venture. It was like fear based. Yeah. And so, so when you think about as women showing up around money, the conversation generally is not something that leans in. When you think about GDP, gross domestic product, interest rates, Federal Reserve, does that make you feel any good and warm and fuzzy? No.
No.
However, when you think about your family and you think about the goals that you and the values that you could create in your children and grandchildren, and to be able to, if you have a couple, that to step off in unison or what that looks like, or to take care of your aging parent and your child that's still in college, those are things that we lean in for.
Yeah.
Those are like, I'm interested. And so in the nature of my work, it tends to be, generally speaking, men seem to be more interested in the investments, where women are more interested in the financial planning. You need both in balance, just like with money, because there's two laws of money that we'll address based on that money is looking for you. But it needs to be in balance, the investments and the plan together, so that you stay on track. And if you think about it, think of the pyramid. And we tend to, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and at the bottom is survival, top is self-actualization for Maslow. If you think of money and planning, the bottom is you have money that you want to invest. In this 4 steps up the pyramid, the second is planning, financial planning. You got to put them together. So that's 1, 2. The third is lifestyle. When you put money and financial planning together, all of a sudden you have lifestyle, meaning you know that you can do it. And when you have lifestyle, it's like peace of mind. For the first time, you're like, oh, wow, we can do this. We can step off and live the life of our dreams. When you take that pause, that pinnacle is impact. Think about how many people, because money is frenetic, you need to put it down here as a foundation so that you can have peace of mind to be able to get to the pinnacle, which is impact, or it could be legacy, fulfillment, whatever word works for you. But to have the impact in your life, like we're here, why are we here? What's your purpose on this planet? Hopefully for many, it's impact. It could be by the children that you have, it could be whatever, but ideally, few of us rarely get there because we're too busy on the hamster wheel.
That's absolutely true. You are like the 100th person on the show who's brought up Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Really? That's so hysterical.
I'm exaggerating, but I would quickly want to just take a sidebar. I really love genealogy. I think it's fun. And on Ancestry, you can find voter registration logs, right? And so when women got the vote, you can see all these ancestors who said, yes, I want to vote. And my father's grandparents, is that right? Yeah, my father's grandparents, they were 2 different political parties. So his grandmother picked a different political party than his grandfather.
I'm not surprised at all. Because there was back then one party that was more likely to grant the women the opportunity to vote. But you mentioned something that's really important, because in my business, we call it humanographics, like humanity on a graph. Because when we come up, how do we show up around money? Many of us have beliefs that are limiting. And where do they come from? And they may not even be your own. Candace. It could be your great grandfather. So if you can plot your family structure, and then ask functional questions and psychological questions around that. Generally, it's in healthcare, it's called a genogram. And that's how they find disease through generations, diabetes, heart disease, addiction issues. I actually took that concept and brought it into the estate planning realm to understand money. And so who was the first to go to college? Where did they immigrate from? What were their occupations? Who was the black sheep? What were the conversations in the family around money? Did you talk about money? What did your family spend money for joy, or was it struggle? All of those things help dictate or give a better understanding on who you may be today around money. And when you ask those questions, it starts to give you an understanding of who you are and whether you still want that, because that was given to you, or no, I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm going to stop that. And moving forward with my daughter versus my grandma and my great grandmother and what they did to my mom. Nope, that generational stuff is not happening. I'm stopping it at this generation. And I am going to teach my daughter about money and independence and freedom and how to make money and own it. So that's a really interesting thing, because if you think of neuroscience, right, we all have little receptors on our bodies that tell us what our bodies need. We have money receptors, and those money receptors are visceral. Think about it. Let me give an example. I was with my son. He's 22. He's graduating in a couple of weeks, believe it or not, from college. And we saw a Lamborghini. And he was like, wow, look at that car. And he's thinking success. I'm thinking, who would spend that much money on a car that's just going to get you to the same destination as any other car? So that was a good indication of a money receptor. Or if we see someone on the street asking for money, do we cross the street? Do we give them something? Do we judge them in some way? Those are all receptors that will help you understand where you're coming from. If the conversation of when I say money is looking for you, and you get this reaction like, she is full of whatever, that's a money receptor.
Yeah.
Or you may have leaned in and thought, this is interesting. She may have something here for me. That's a money receptor. And so if you think about what those are and become alert to them, then it's easier to unpack and be open to what is your own. And how do you show up in a way that is in alignment with your values, that's in alignment with your vision, is in alignment with your creativity and your passion and your joy and aliveness? Then all of a sudden, money's down here. You're not really thinking about it anymore. You're living your life.
Yeah.
Because there's no amount of money that can create an extraordinary life.
Yeah.
Even though we tend to think it in this culture.
Yeah. Because you can do extraordinary things without money.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Don't get me wrong. It makes life a lot easier to have your base needs met. Absolutely get it. But beyond that, it actually does not improve quality of life. It's up to us.
Mother Teresa just had to make a phone call to have an airplane take her someplace. You know, she had she had the world at her feet.
That's right.
And she didn't make $1. So
that's right.
So, wow. So when I was in my early 20s, I worked for a company that was I think we had about 200 employees it was a manufacturing facility. We had about 200 employees. We were owned by a bigger company, but our small company was 200 employees. And I pulled into the parking lot at the same time as the CEO, and we were parked next to each other. And I get out of my car, he gets out of his car, and I said, "You got a new car?" And he goes, "New to me." And that at that moment, I was like, it was a life lesson, right? Here he is, the CEO of this company. This is a very successful, very well-known company. And he didn't buy a brand new car. He bought a new to him car. And I just thought, wow, that's a life lesson. I have never, ever in my entire life purchased a brand new car. Yeah.
There's a rule around that. It's called the 30-month rule. And the 30-month rule is you never buy a new car, ever. It doesn't make any financial sense. But you buy 30 months, which is 2.5 years old, under 30,000 miles is the best value for your buck. It's called the 30-month rule for car purchasing.
I love that rule. That's a good rule. That's a good rule. Okay. Where are we? Ooh,
Should we talk about the 2 laws of money?
yes,
Did you have a
absolutely.
thought before that?
No, I was looking at the time to see where we were. It's a good thing I edit, right? So tell me about the 2 laws of money.
Well, so this is really important to understand because the human-made laws is what I do every day. That's portfolio construction, tax mitigation, spending plans, estate planning. The other laws of money is natural money laws. So we have human-made laws and natural money laws. And natural money laws are what's inside of us already, but we've lost track of it. So we were talking about Niagara Falls. I think so. Here are some of the natural money laws. One is giving and receiving. For money to flow, we need both. Many times, particularly as women, we tend to be really good at giving and maybe not so good at receiving. So it's really important for the flow that you can do both. The other is cause and effect, intention, desire, clear agreements, ebb and flow. Those are all natural money laws that we already have inside of us. So if we're starting to think of this conversation that we had in the very beginning, Candace, where maybe some of the listeners were not as intrigued by our money conversation that we all got excited about, well, as women and anybody, we already have these natural money laws inside of us. So if we want lasting wealth in our life, then we need to follow the natural money laws and then learn about the human-made laws as we need to for ultimate life success. And again, in balance, natural money laws with human-made laws, but it starts with natural money laws.
Wow. Can we go back for a second to your generational money relationship with money?
Yes.
Because I find it fascinating. I'm just going to use my own, because again, genealogy, I love genealogy. In the early 1900s, I had two great-great-great-grandmothers who were both business owners. But they were business owners because their husbands died and they were forced to do this. And then their children didn't, their children worked and their children worked. And then I find myself here as a business owner who couldn't imagine ever not being a business owner, right? Ever working for, I worked for somebody else until I was 28 and I was like, that's it, I'm done. I'm not doing that anymore. So, but I wasn't forced through, through losing because I didn't lose my husband, but that drive to do whatever needed to be done. And my grandmother was also a business owner on my mother's side. So that drive to do whatever it was that needed to be done because there wasn't a man to support you. That generational thing though is interesting.
I think it's important to take a look at the generational footprint to help you understand where your starting point is. And then consciously make a choice to do it differently.
Yeah, that's good advice. So, and for people who don't know, if you can't go any farther than your grandparents, you might not know where it came from.
Right.
You might not know the stories, the stories that came before, because a lot of folks in the early 1900s, late 1800s, they didn't want to tell their stories. It was all family secrets. Right. And the families, and it still goes on. It still goes on to these days, family secrets. What do you mean?
There's many skeletons in a lot of closets. Candace, I'll share a story that may be helpful for the viewers and listeners. So when I was 14, my parents got divorced and my mom got full custody with 3 teenage girls. I was the middle of the 3. She had no employable skills, so she applied for and received government assisted lunches. So I had this red ticket that looked like a raffle ticket. Truly, it was a raffle ticket that I had to hand to the cashier every day to get government assisted lunch, which was, I'm a poor kid. So the shame around that, the unworthiness around that, the I'm not enough story was significant. Going off to college and then law school, I immediately defaulted on my school loans. I had no business understanding money, credit, and I had a lot of shame of who am I? I'm unworthy. I'm not enough. And in today's dollars, that was about $92,000 that I had in debt, school loan debt.
Oh my God.
That I defaulted on. So all of a sudden I have bad credit. I'm in my 20s. I was so not aware. This is why I'm sharing this story. And then I had an anonymous donor pay $1,000 on my school loan debt. Now, first of all, when you are in denial, you're not opening up statements. So the fact that I did happen to open it up to notice that the balance went down, not up, first of all, was wow, meaningful. And two, that it was anonymous. So I had to ask, I couldn't go to them, what do you want? Or what do you see in me?
Mm-hmm.
I had to ask those questions to myself. And so it's like, what do they see in me that I don't see in me? Who am I? And who do I want to be? And I have to tell you that noticing that that balance went down, and by $1,000 back then, it was like $1 million to me. I had no money. So that was a lot of money to me, and in terms of what it meant. And so it was almost like a snap when I recognized that, and I was asking myself those questions, that things changed. Now, it wasn't immediate. Obviously, it was a journey from that point on. But what happened is I realized I was unconscious around money. I had my head in the sand. Sometimes I say this a lot, is how you do money is how you do life. So if your head is in the sand on money, trust me, there are other areas in your life that you are not addressing. And so it allowed me to be conscious, to ask myself those questions of who am I? And at that time, Candace, I honestly believed that the choice I made then is that I am 100% responsible for how my future is going to be. Like, events happen in our lives that we have no control over. I had no control over the parents' divorce and so forth, but I was using it as a crutch for whatever I wasn't addressing. And so I think it was at that point that I realized someone loves me. That is an act of love. Do I love myself? Do I respect myself? What am I going to do differently so that I then, moving forward, I'm 100% responsible for the choices I make that will give me different outcomes. And here are the outcomes I want. I am not going to be someone in debt. I'm not going to be that person. That's not someone I want to be. And so that was the start of this journey. And now as CEO of a wealth management firm, I mean, that's a huge leap.
Mm-hmm.
Not to mention abundance and financial success and joy and love and everything else that goes with it in a happy, fulfilling life. So it's never too late. It could be just like that. And from that point forward, you're making deliberate, aware choices. And this conversation really is about wealth consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
And step up, stand up, rise up, take control, and make different decisions in your life moving forward.
You know, I used to have, I am 100% responsible for my life on a little sticky notes all over my house, until it was internalized, right?
Yeah.
Until it was internalized. All right. This is going to be a controversial question, but it's been in the news lately, so I want to talk about it. And I'm asking you because you were a beneficiary of this service. How do you feel that if every student in your school was provided a free meal rather than having to have a raffle ticket, that you wouldn't have felt stigmatized by that raffle ticket?
I have a daughter and a son, 25 and 22. And it's hard to say everyone gets a trophy. That's not the way I come from. And so I think there are other ways to address what you're describing that is not to like give everyone free lunch, for the few that get the ticket. So I'm stronger for the ticket. My life is better as a result of that ticket, but there are different ways to address it. And now we have digital, no one knows anymore, of how that is.
Is that true? My kid's 24, so it's been a while since she's been in school. And
they have a ID, and that ID or a card allows for that.
So nobody knows.
Because remember,
who funded
digital
the
transfer, digital currency and all that. So
there is the I bring my own lunch from home versus the I get stand in line. My kid didn't want to stand in line for lunch because she thought it was too long. She said by the time they're done standing in line, it's time to go back to class. So she just wanted to bring her own lunch.
Well, where our kids went to school, it's an open campus. High school is an open campus because the high school is so large, there's not a large enough cafeteria. So the students actually leave the campus and go to some fast food place, or they have their lunch and they eat it somewhere in a park.
Yeah.
So very different in Denver.
I didn't understand why my daughter's high school wasn't an open campus, because they had like 3 fast food restaurants right across the street. So why would you force these kids? But I felt like the school she went, I felt like every school that she attended was a prison. I mean, whenever I would go to one of her events at school and I would watch the way they treated these kids, I was like, oh my God, I put my child in prison. But I wasn't going to homeschool.
Well, you're hitting on a number of topics. I think that every industry, whether it's education, finance, is being disrupted.
Yeah.
It's being disrupted with technology, artificial intelligence. Imagine 5 years from now, how different, a decade, of how different every industry will be. Healthcare.
Yeah.
I think of our nurses and our docs that don't have control over the decisions that they make. The insurance companies have control over the outcomes of that. That's a tough position to be in with all that education that you can't control the outcome. It's a tough one. And so I think of all these different industries that will be different. So our children that are going to school, they definitely have to change, like your daughter in the prison type school, to the way we learn, because our brains are now structured very differently than they were when I went to school.
Well, here's the thing. Her high school had a academy. It was called an academy. 100 students out of 1,000 or 1,400 per class were given the opportunity to apply for the academy. And if you belonged to the academy, you had a more rigorous education program, but it was also more dynamic. And I could never figure out why they didn't just treat every student with that same, because obviously it worked. I mean, she's a grad student now. She's doing great. Right. So, and then kids that weren't in that program, single moms okay. So her high school had an academy for the top 100 in each class. And it also had a daycare for the girls in the school who had kids. So tell me how that works. Tell me why that's working. It's not working. Right. Because
no, there's no way that can work. Basically, you're creating divides in between.
Yeah.
You're creating division in between each of those set communities. So it's tough.
And if the academy worked, why not roll it out to every student? Why not treat every student, give every student the opportunity to, just because you had a kid when you were 16 doesn't mean you can't go to grad school. Right.
That's right.
So why not encourage them to do it?
Right.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's why it's up to us.
Yeah.
It's up to us individually to be somebody, to know you're somebody, to know you're loved, to know you're uniquely here on this planet for something that only you can do.
Yeah. Yeah. And if it's not your parents who are telling you that, it's got to be your teachers, and your teachers can't tell you that if they don't feel empowered to.
That's right. Some of your listeners may have stories of an educator or a teacher who actually changed the direction of their life.
Mm-hmm.
I had a math teacher. My last name started at the time with a W, so they alphabetically seated us, and I was always in the back. And I didn't know that I couldn't see the board. I didn't know that I needed glasses. And I think we talked in the green room, that I'm, unmedicated ADD. So, I'm talking to whoever's around me, and this math teacher moved me to the front of the room, right next to his desk that was at the front, which was humiliating at first. But within 2 minutes after doing that, he moved my best friend up next to me.
Wow.
And I tell you, that was an act of caring.
Yeah.
That was an act of caring. And I could see the board. I was in front of him, so I didn't feel like I needed to talk to anybody. Yeah. And I actually did really well in math. But prior to that, I thought I wasn't smart enough in math.
Empower the teachers to empower the students.
Mm-hmm.
If women ran the world.
Well, I don't even think it's one or the other. It's imbalance. The harmony is so important to understand. As women take on more positions of power and authority and in government, it's not to have that seesaw shift. No, it's to keep it in balance.
Yeah.
And that's really key. When you think of the UN and the World Health Organization and all of these communities that need help, they give money to women to become entrepreneurs. And those women get their kids to school and they feed them and they become something in the community to make better decisions in the community that expands for more people. And so I don't think that it will go like this at all. I think that all boats will rise with the rising tide. And
Yeah.
I look forward to that opportunity to see.
Me too. Me too. I think that's more about how the nurturing nature of women, though, that women don't want to leave anybody behind for the most part. So, if we are in charge, we aren't going to leave the men behind. There'll never be a situation where women make it impossible for men to have credit or buy houses or have jobs. We'll never do that to men.
Or control over their bodies.
Or control their bodies. Exactly. We won't ever do that to men. Although sometimes I really want to.
Yeah, I think it's just an interesting place where we are right now. I look forward to seeing. I'm an I'm a realist. Have to be with money, but I tend to think that as frenetic as it is today and divisive as it is today, that it's kind of the messy middle that we need to go through to get to a more generous, abundant, caring future to the planet, to each other, to the world.
Yeah, I have faith. I think that it might take us another 100 years or so, but I think that we'll become a Star Trek society. Okay, so this is a marketing podcast. So as an author and as a financial expert, what's your favorite marketing tool, tip, or technique?
This podcasting. Because it's fun. You get to talk about interesting things and reach a variety of people. And I think podcasting is actually a really solid medium.
Yeah. And it's fun.
It is.
It's fun. It's a great way to meet interesting new people. Right. And then connect them with each other.
Right.
Okay. So this is my favorite part of the episode. It's your moment of gratitude. For whom or what are you most grateful?
Well, I'm grateful for that $1,000 gift, and hopefully that I've learned from that gift. Hopefully I shared that with your viewers and listeners, and that they can turn that idea into way more than $1,000. But I would have to say for today, it's that my son's graduating from college in 2 weeks and as a business major, and I just am busting out of the seams as a mom.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of Gratitude Geek, the relationship marketing podcast helping DIY marketers attract raving fans and repeat buyers. I hope you gained some valuable insights and strategies that you can apply to your own business today. Don't forget to check out the show notes at our website at gratitudegeek.com for links to all the groovy resources we discussed in today's episode, including links to connect to our guest, Kim Curtis. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe to the show on Audible, iTunes, Stitcher, or any of your favorite podcast players so you never miss an episode. Our theme music is track 14 by Rev Brock and Soul Lily. I've been your host, Candace Rodarty, reminding you that gratitude is like manure. It's just a pile of poo until you spread it around. Stay groovy, my friends.
Stay groovy, my friends.